in the High Court's hands. The Supreme Court will decide if the Little Sisters of the Poor must provide contraceptives. Vatileaks. A top Vatican official speaks out against claims of financial mismanagement. Ebola-free countdown. After a devastating epidemic, Sierra Leone will soon be free of the disease. And honoring the greatest generation. We hear firsthand from World War II veterans. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Friday, November 6th, 2015. Good evening and thank you for joining us. I'm Catherine Seltner in for Brian Patrick with your news now. The U.S. Supreme Court will take up a challenge to the Obamacare birth control mandate. The case involves faith-based hospitals, colleges, and charities objecting to that law, including the Little Sisters of the Poor. The mandate forces them to pay for contraceptives as part of their health care plan, which they say violates their religious beliefs. The Beckett Fund represents the Little Sisters and says those fines could cripple their order.
If they don't cooperate with the government's efforts to force the inclusion of these drugs in their plans, the sisters across the country would face roughly $75 million in fines over the first year. So the government is quite serious about forcing them to include contraceptives.
The case will be argued in late March. It could impact EWTN's case, which is currently in the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit. The Beckett Fund also represents our network in that case. President Obama rejects the Keystone XL Oil Pipeline. This comes after 7 years of federal reviews. Our Jason Calvi reports tonight from the White House. Jason?
Catherine, the president says the pipeline doesn't serve U.S. national interests. He gave several reasons. He says it won't lower gas prices or increase U.S. jobs, but supporters of the Keystone Pipeline quickly rejected those claims.
The Keystone XL Pipeline would run 1,100 miles, linking pipelines in Canada and the United States. That requires permits to cross the U.S.-Canadian border. Today, the president rejected TransCanada's application, first submitted in 2008.
If Congress is serious about wanting to create jobs, this was not the way to do it. The pipeline would not lower gas prices for American consumers. Shipping dirtier crude oil into our country would not increase America's energy security.
But supporters of the pipeline say the economic benefits are real.
42,000 jobs as determined by their own State Department that we're waiting for are now gone, along with $2 billion in wages they would have made. We're actually going to now emit more carbon to the atmosphere because that same oil produced will move by train and barge to find its market home.
Supporters of the project are expected to challenge the president's decision in court. And the Republican-controlled Congress may try to override him.
This is part of a 7-year saga, one of the biggest environmental controversies of the Obama presidency. But the Keystone Pipeline could get a new look with the next occupant here at the White House. All of the GOP candidates are unanimous in their support of the Keystone Pipeline. Catherine?
Thank you, Jason Calvi. President Obama made his first statement on the doomed flight that broke apart last week, killing all 224 people on board. The president says a bomb may have detonated. If an explosion crashed the plane, could something like that happen in the United States?
I think there is a possibility that there was a bomb on board, and we're taking that very seriously.
The President of the United States weighing in on what could have crashed Metrojet Flight 9268. The flight filled with Russian tourists broke apart mid-air. But many in the United States want to know, can a bomb get on an American flight? Just this week, congressional testimony detailed an undercover operation where TSA failed 95% of the time, detecting fake explosives at U.S. airports.
The failures included technology, TSA procedures, and human errors.
But the larger threat may be beyond the passenger security line.
You may have someone who has gone through all the security checks, has passed all the background checks, but has been successful in hiding their true loyalty or allegiance to Al-Qaeda, Muslim Brotherhood, or ISIS. And this is the ultimate threat, the insider threat.
That's what some believe happened in this case. One U.S. official says Intelligence suggests someone in the Sharm el-Sheikh airport helped get a bomb onto the plane. The speculation is unsettling. ISIS has taken responsibility for downing the aircraft. Those claims have not been confirmed. And now for other stories, our EWTN News Nightly team is covering in today's world. October was a blockbuster month for American workers. The U.S. economy added 271,000 jobs last month, pushing the unemployment rate to its lowest level since 2008 at just 5%. Wages are up too. Average hourly earnings rose 2.5%, its best gain in years. Today's jobs report is better than expected. Experts say that increases odds the Federal Reserve will raise interest rates next month. While Donald Trump takes the stage at Saturday Night Live this weekend, other candidates, GOP candidates, will take the stage at events in the first-in-the-nation caucus state after getting bumped from the main stage in next week's Republican showdown. Wyatt Goolsby reports.
A GOP debate shakeup after a week of shifting ground in the Republican presidential race. Trump and Carson are up. Christie and Huckabee are down, both relegated to the undercard debate hosted by Fox Business next week. And Lindsey Graham and George Pataki are out of the debate entirely after their poll numbers fell short of the required minimum. For the top two contenders, tensions are on the rise. Trump releasing a new political ad yesterday.
You'll never be disappointed. I don't disappoint people. I produce. Together, we're going to make America great again.
Trump also attacking Carson after two recent polls showed the retired neurosurgeon leading the pack. Trump tweeted, quote, "The Carson story is either a total fabrication or, if true, even worse, trying to hit his mother over the head with a hammer or stabbing a friend." Trump referencing Carson's description in his autobiography of his violent behavior and quick temper as a youth before finding God.
I tried to stab someone. That was probably the most outrageous thing.
Carson calls questions about his story silly.
Why would you be able to find them? What makes you think you would be able to find them? Unless I tell you who they are. And if they come forward on their own because of your story, that's fine.
Wyatt Goolsby, EWTN News Nightly.
Genevieve Wood is the former spokeswoman for the Republican National Committee. Genevieve, what do you make of the Fox Business debate move? Is it okay to just have 8 candidates on stage?
Well, look, every one of these debates and network outlets have had their own rules that they've stated from the get-go that said, you got to beat this percentage and this many polls by this certain date to make our debate stage. And so this is not unusual what Fox Business is doing. Look, I think 8 people, still a lot of folks on a stage. It is still all the front runners that are out there. So, I think hopefully we're going to get into more details that we haven't seen in the more recent debates.
So what about the undercard debate? Won't Christie and Huckabee be the obvious winners?
Well, if they perform as well as they have in the other ones, probably. I mean, Christie, I think, has done quite well, frankly, in many of the most recent debates, and Huckabee's always got something interesting to say, and he's entertained to watch. So, it may mean that more people watch that first debate than have in the past. So we'll see how that plays out.
There have already been so many debates. We still have a year until the election. Do debates even change people's minds?
Look, I think debates serve 2 purposes. One, it introduces people to candidates they never knew. I mean, before this thing got started, everybody knew who Jeb Bush was. Many of them didn't know who Ben Carson was. They'd heard of Donald Trump, but I don't think they thought about him as a candidate. They didn't know Carly Fiorina. Marco Rubio was not a national name. The people that are now at the top of the polls on the Republican side, in some cases, were the least well known when this thing got started. I think the debates have a lot to do with that.
You mentioned Ben Carson. There are new accusations he's been fabricating some stories in his personal life. How is that going to impact his brand which is of honesty and humility?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the reasons Ben Carson's done so well is he's the opposite of what most people think about politicians, honest, right? I think, look, he's going to have to answer these questions. I think the sooner he gets out on this story, the better for him. I haven't read the book. I have seen the movie. He was a character as a kid growing up, if the book is true. And look, I think a lot of people, when they write these books, they have ghostwriters. There may be things that don't come out exactly as they were, but he needs to get ahead of the story, explain that to people. Otherwise, it could become a real problem for him.
Genevieve Wood, thank you for coming here. Grateful for your insight. And a Central Kentucky police officer who was shot in the head while pursuing a lead in an investigation has died. Kentucky State Police say 33-year-old Daniel Ellis died early today at the University of Kentucky Medical Center. Ellis had remained in the hospital after suffering life-threatening injuries following the shooting Wednesday morning. Police arrested 2 suspects. One of them, Raleigh Sizemore, now faces multiple charges. Germany passes a bill allowing some forms of assisted suicide. The bill makes it legal for, quote, altruistic motives, but bans the practice when it's being conducted as a business. The last time euthanasia was part of German public policy, it was used by the Nazis to kill hundreds of thousands of people with physical and mental disabilities. A representative from Human Life International says the law isn't perfect, but it's a start.
It would be better if they just came out directly and said assisted suicide is not allowed, period. And in fact, that's actually what the Jewish community in Germany asked them to do. But instead, they kind of took a middle position there saying, look, we're going to ban any commercial exploitation of assisted suicide. But if someone does it on their own, we're not going to criminalize that activity.
Meany says before this law, cases of assisted suicide were not prosecuted. A top church official responds to claims of financial scandal in the Vatican made in a couple of new books. Cardinal George Pell says the books contain false and misleading information. His statement comes after the arrest of 2 former Papal Commission members and an investigation into stolen documents. Edward Penton is the Rome correspondent for the National Catholic Register. Ed, how did Cardinal Pell, the head of Vatican finances, respond to the allegations?
Well, he sent out a statement, his secretary sent out a statement just to say really that the allegations made in the book are false and misleading. The books claim that he spent 500,000 euros basically of his own, on his own sort of volition, but that really wasn't the case. I mean, they laid out where the expenditure went, and a lot of it went in salaries, in running this relatively large dicastery of 12 people, which is trying to reform the Vatican finances. And it was all made very clear. It actually said at the end that the expenditure was less than most Vatican entities for this year, the expenditure was. So that it was being very clear about the allegations and hit back quite strongly against it.
And Ed, can you clarify, what is Cardinal Pell's role?
Cardinal Pell's role is really to help the Holy Father reform the church's, the Vatican's financial system, if you like. It's been in the news quite a lot lately for certain scandals, financial scandals in the last few years, and I think there was a general push to reform this. This was part of the sort of mandate the Pope had when he came in 2013 from the other cardinals. It was really to reform it, and the Secretariat is really trying to do that, and it's been doing that, full time since last year, and they're making quite significant steps. And I think this sort of backlash, if you like, is what they feel is the effect of those reforms. It's a certain resistance coming through to the reforms that they're making, because they're making certain people quite uncomfortable in the Curia who've got used to the way the Vatican's been run financially.
Well, Ed Penton, we're grateful for your insight and reporting as usual from the National Catholic Register. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pope Francis urges pro-life supporters to continue to defend human life at all stages. That comment today as the Holy Father meets with members of the Italian pro-life movement. He encouraged them to promote and defend the family. The Pope noted that when pregnant women are offered help, they are able to carry out their babies to term in difficult situations. Coming up, soon to be virus-free, we take you to Sierra Leone, a nation that's been devastated by Ebola. And voices of veterans, we hear from the greatest generation.
Quando la Chiesa è tepida, chiusa in se stessa.
The Holy Father celebrating Mass today in the Vatican, reminding the faithful in his homily the Church is called to serve, not to be served. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm Catherine Seltner. Sierra Leone is 1 day away from the all clear from the deadly Ebola virus. That, according to the World Health Organization, they say the outbreak killed more than 11,000 people in Sierra Leone, Guinea, and Liberia. Some survivors now have serious medical problems. It's left kids without parents and damaged the economies of the West African nations. Ishmael Charles has been on the front lines fighting Ebola through education and sanitation. He says people have big plans for tomorrow.
It's a very wonderful day because a lot of people in Freetown and across the country are looking forward to this moment when WHO tomorrow morning by 10 a.m. Sierra Leonean time will declare Sierra Leone Ebola-free. And so everyone is jubilant.
Tomorrow, Sierra Leone will officially be Ebola-free, but in neighboring Guinea, the World Health Organization reported a new case of Ebola, a newborn baby infected with the deadly disease. Next week, we will honor the men and women who have served our country. Ahead of Veterans Day, Mark Irons caught up with a couple of World War II veterans and listened to their stories.
Jim Lavelle remembers his story. He was a sailor aboard the USS Whitney during the Pearl Harbor attack. After his Navy service, Jim became a homicide detective in Dallas, Texas. When President Kennedy was assassinated, Lavelle was the first person to interrogate Lee Harvey Oswald and escort him through Dallas Police Headquarters right at the moment Jack Ruby shot Oswald.
I told him, I said, Lee, if anybody shoots at you, I hope they're as good a shot as you are, meaning that they'd hit him and not me.
Jim Lavelle is one of many veterans inspiring the next generation of servicemen and women at this annual conference in Washington. It's a weekend to honor vets like former Ambassador Alan Lukens, who brings proof of his service in World War II.
I've never wanted to wash it or touch it, but it showed we were there.
He took the flag from Dachau concentration camp after helping to liberate suffering prisoners.
30-some thousand prisoners who were all emaciated, were all over us, wanted to talk to us, wanted food.
He also saw 38 freight cars filled with dead bodies.
Later on, when I talked to some of the former prisoners, they were just so fortunate, some of them, that they just managed to get off the train before they died there.
Those from the greatest generation share memories with the new generation, like high school ROTC members.
I actually learned a lot, and it actually inspires me.
The veterans' stories inspire lots of people. The conference brings together many distinguished vets, including people like Buzz Aldrin, one of the first to set foot on the moon. He'll be speaking tomorrow. Catherine.
Such honorable men. Thank you for that story, Mark. Up next, deadbeat dads. Is this a trend, and why? And the power of prayer. A Wisconsin sister who responds to prayer requests from strangers gives us her insight. Thank you for joining us on this first Friday when we reflect on our Lord's passion and death. I'm Catherine Seltner. Are young women enabling male stagnation? That's a question posed by one political analyst in a recent National Review article. Mona Charen writes, many young women are having children out of wedlock. She observes, if young women consider men to be unfit husbands, shouldn't they also consider the men unfit fathers? Mona Charen joins us now. She is a senior fellow at the Ethics and Public Policy Center. Mona, so just how common is it to have children out of wedlock?
So for women who don't get a college degree, unfortunately, it has become incredibly common, even the norm. 60% of mothers who have children before the age of 30 will have at least one of those children out of wedlock. So it's very, very serious.
So why is it so common? Why is this trend increasing?
There are many reasons. There is the availability of government benefits. There's the lack of stigma now with the sexual revolution. There's no longer a stigma to unwed childbearing. There's also the fact that a lot of young guys are unemployed. And so the question comes up, is it that they're unemployed, that's the reason the women don't consider them to be fit husbands, or are they not fit husbands because they're unemployed? So we don't really know. It's all mixed together. Except this much we do know for sure. Once men get married, they are better earners. They're much more strategic at work about the way they try to move ahead within any organization. They earn more money, and they're more reliable. So all of that is
right. What is
a reason to marry.
What is the correlation between intact families and employment?
So, right, you are far more likely to, men are far more likely to find work. They will accept any job if they have a wife and kids to support. So you don't find the same kind of phenomenon of a guy sitting watching video games in his parents' basement if he's got a wife and kids. The world changes after you take on those responsibilities. And unfortunately, to our society in general, and young women apparently don't feel empowered enough to say, you know what, fella? you need to go out there and get a job and support us.
And finally, what would you encourage young women to avoid these type of situations?
Well, they should bear in mind that the most important decision they will ever make is who they settle down with and who they form a family with. George Akerlof, a Nobel Prize-winning economist, said, when men marry, they settle down, and if they fail to marry, they fail to settle down. So it's the responsibility of women and men to take on this adult responsibility when they become young adults, and to recognize that marriage and forming the family unit is more important to themselves, their own happiness, their children's welfare, and society's welfare than any other decision they will make.
Mona Charen, great advice. Thank you for joining us from the Ethics and Public Policy Center.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Last night we told you about a Wisconsin convent that's been praying nonstop since 1878. The Franciscan Sisters of Perpetual Adoration in La Crosse, Wisconsin, take in prayer requests from all over the world. About 18 years ago, the number of sisters started dwindling, so community members stepped up to take on 1-hour prayer shifts. Sister Sarah Hennessy is one of those Franciscan Sisters of Perpetual Adoration. Sister, what an incredible witness. What's your role in the convent in taking in those prayer requests?
As a coordinator of Perpetual Adoration, I receive about 75 prayer intentions every day through the email, through the phone, on paper slips, and then I respond to people and let them know that we're praying for them. I send cards to people all over the world and let them know that we hear them and we're holding them in prayer.
It's incredible. Why did this tradition begin?
Mother Antonia in 1865 made a promise that we would establish Perpetual Adoration and build a chapel as beautiful as our means will allow. And it's a way of spreading that furnace of divine love is what we call it in the world. And it's the fire for our whole community as we move forward.
And Sister, can you share what kind of fruit have you seen from this prayer?
You know, there is so much fruit. First, it changes who we are. Pope Francis says that we don't wait for God when we pray, but that he changes our hearts and that he gets in front of us. And then we've had thank yous every day from people who've had cancer. They said, you know, I never believed in the power of prayer, but with my cancer, this has all changed, and your prayers are holding me and changing my life.
God is so real. And of course, non-religious also come to pray. What's the role of local community members?
We have 180 prayer partners, people who live here around us, who work in our college or in our hospital, and they come and help with our date hours. A lot of the 80-year-old sisters, they do the 2 a.m. hours, but we have people from the community come in during the daytime, and they just love it. They say it's the best hour of their week.
Wow, more power to those 2 a.m. prayers. And Sister, you are at Adoration a lot. Do you have any prayer tips for us?
You know, the thing about prayer is it goes into your whole life. And to be open, to be empty, that's when God comes in and God steps in. And to feel the presence, particularly in Adoration. I know Adoration is just spreading across the world and the country, and you feel the real presence right there in your heart all the time.
So beautiful. Thank you for your prayers. Know that we'll be praying for you. Sister Sarah Hennessy, Franciscan Sisters of Perpetual Adoration. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all for tonight. For the EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Catherine Seltner. Have a blessed weekend. We'll see you here again next week. We leave you tonight with sounds of sacred music at the St. Ignatius of Loyola Church in Rome.